The Trump Organization took in more than $270 million last year, a steep decline from 2019 when it made at least $440 million, but it is still a relatively large business. And Donald Trump has worked hard to make sure that that large business remains in the hands of a very, very small number of people. Still a private company, only a few employees besides Trump himself wield much power. You've got Chief Operations Officer Matthew Calamari, longtime Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg, recently indicted for tax fraud, and Trump's adult children, or at least some of them, Don Jr., Eric, and Ivanka. Because the team is so small, each of those people essentially have more exposure as the New York District Attorney and the Attorney General's investigation continues, because there's only a limited number of people you can blame. Legal experts are now pointing to former first daughter and advisor to the president, Ivanka Trump, as the next member of the inner circle who should be very concerned. Like Alan Weisselberg, Ivanka Trump was reportedly paid consulting fees by the Trump org while she was an active employee there, and that could open her up to possible tax fraud charges as well. Cynthia Alksny is a former federal prosecutor, one of those legal experts predicting Ivanka could be next on the chopping block, and she joins me now. Cynthia, just take me through your thinking here, because I've seen a number of people who are informed and smart on this suggest similar or along these lines, that there's reasons to be worried if you're Ivanka. Why?
Well, here's why. What we know from the Weisselberg indictment is that there's a pervasive scheme at this company of tax fraud. And there's a second set of books, which is pretty detailed. And there are several people involved in the scheme that, different people are signing checks, different people know about it. So there's witnesses there. And it's hard for me to believe that the Trump Organization would decide, we're going to figure out a way to save Alan Weisselberg almost $1 million in taxes, but we're not going to do it for anybody else. I mean, I just don't believe that, right? And I don't believe they would do that and not do it for higher ups in the company. And right now, what we have is a situation where the only person indicted is Alan Weisselberg, and nobody named Trump. And I find that hard to believe that the scheme didn't include them. Now, whether or not they can prove it, separate thing. But I do think that because of the pervasive scheme, and because we've known since November of 2020 that she has this issue about payments. And the issue is this. At some point in 2017, she was paid $2.2 million from Trump Organization. And also, there is a question of whether or not she got $750,000 in consulting fees. Here's the way the IRS works. Either you are an employee or you are an independent contractor, and you are not both.
Correct.
So somebody, I'm sure, some brilliant tax person in the New York DA's office is looking at this issue with a laser focus, and it seems to me a logical place for them to be looking.
So two things there. One, that on the latter point, I mean, that even when we found that out, right, that was a head scratcher for anyone even, vaguely familiar with the tax code, vaguely familiar, people all the time, they'll be an employee at a place and maybe they leave and they do some consulting afterwards, part-time on the side. You can't consult and be an employee for the same place almost as a matter of definition. That looked weird even when we found out about it, just knowing nothing else.
Well, it certainly looks fishy. And then if you add, it looks fishy in essentially a swamp of tax fraud. That's what makes me think that's where they're going to look. I mean, that makes sense to me. Calamari makes sense to me, because it seems to me that they have a system to save people tax money. And that's part of the way they do their compensation. I mean, that's what we know from this indictment. Now, whether or not they have the goods to prove it, we're going to see. But that makes sense to me.
That's such an important point, because one of the things I think that I've now understood, having read the indictment, is the perk isn't the car or the tuition. The perk is the tax evasion. The perk you're giving the employee is tax-free compensation, which in real dollar terms is worth 40 to 50% more, because at the income level you're at, you'd be paying a ton of it in taxes.
Right. I mean, certainly this is not the biggest tax case in the history of time. I don't think there's any question about that. But if you're the person who's getting $235,000 or $236,000 in a gift of getting of not having to pay tax on that because of your grandchildren, or you're getting, Weisselberg got close to $1 million he didn't have to pay tax on. That's pretty sweet. That's exactly what the gift is. Now, and having said that,
all people
it brings loyalty. I mean, Weisselberg has been there for almost 50 years. Trump's taking care of his family. He employs his son. He may never flip.